Welcome to this deep dive, into the mystery of consciousness.
Ooh,
You've given us a really thought-provoking excerpt from an article,
okay.
and it summarizes this discussion between
Uh-huh.
a neuroscientist, Anil Seth, and
Right.
astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Okay.
And they're on a podcast.
Yeah.
So we're going to unpack some of the biggest questions.
Right.
What is consciousness?
Yeah.
How did it evolve?
Okay.
Are humans the only ones who experience it? And
Oh.
could AI ever truly be conscious?
Well, what's so captivating about this discussion is that these questions
Right.
have stumped philosophers and scientists for centuries.
Yeah.
And even with all of our scientific progress, we're still grappling with this fundamental nature of consciousness.
It's amazing how something we experience every moment of our waking lives
Right.
can be so elusive when we try to define it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Seth dives right into this challenge.
Okay.
He describes consciousness as a biological property, something that emerged through the process of evolution, just like our physical bodies.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
But then he throws us a real curveball
Uh-huh.
by asking why we wake up every morning as ourselves.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are billions of other people on this planet, yet we each have this distinct, continuous sense of self.
Yeah, that persistent sense of self, that
Yeah.
feeling of I that
Mhm.
continues from one day to the next. It's something we often take for granted.
Yeah, for sure.
But Seth challenges us to consider if this stable self is real
Mm-hmm.
or simply a powerful illusion
Oh, wow.
created by our brains.
An illusion.
Yeah,
That's a pretty radical idea.
it is.
So are there people who actually believe that consciousness itself doesn't exist?
There are
Whoa.
some philosophers, they're called illusionists,
Okay.
and they argue that our feeling of consciousness, that subjective experience of being aware,
Right.
is essentially a trick,
Real.
a kind of elaborate illusion cooked up by our brains.
Oh.
They propose that there's no real self experiencing the world, just a convincing story our minds tell us.
So it's like our brains were master storytellers,
Yes.
creating this seamless narrative of a continuous me, even though it might not actually exist.
That's the illusionist's perspective.
Wow.
However, Seth vehemently disagrees.
Okay.
He argues that our conscious experience, that raw feeling of what it's like to be us,
Right.
is the one thing we can be absolutely certain of.
Okay.
To illustrate this, he uses the example of anesthesia.
Okay.
Think about it.
Okay.
When you're under anesthesia, you're not just asleep, you're completely unconscious.
Right.
There's no experience, no sense of self, no world.
That's a really powerful point.
It is.
It makes it clear that there's a profound difference
Yeah.
between being conscious and
Uh-huh.
unconscious, a difference that goes beyond mere brain activity.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So, and this brings us to another big question.
Okay.
Could we ever recreate this phenomenon artificially? Could AI ever become truly conscious?
That's a question that's been explored in countless science fiction stories.
Right.
But as AI technology advances in the real world, it's becoming less about fiction and more about a potential reality.
And that's where the goalpost problem comes into play.
Okay, the goalpost problem.
Yeah. As AI gets more sophisticated,
Right.
we seem to constantly redefine what we consider to be true consciousness.
Okay.
For example, remember when Deep Blue,
Yeah, oh yeah.
the IBM supercomputer,
Uh-huh.
beat Garry Kasparov at chess in 1997?
Yeah.
People initially thought this was a sign of AI consciousness.
Right. It was a huge deal at the time.
It was.
But then the focus shifted to
Yeah.
other aspects of intelligence,
Yes.
like emotional intelligence, creativity, and subjective experience.
Exactly.
We kept raising the bar for what would count as genuine AI consciousness.
It's as if we're trying to hold on to our sense of
Uh-huh.
human exceptionalism
Oh, yeah.
by continuously shifting the definition of what makes us unique.
So are we just clinging to the idea of consciousness as the last bastion of human uniqueness?
Yeah.
Just like people once believed that the Earth was the center of the universe.
It's a fascinating parallel.
It is.
First, we thought we were the center of the universe.
Right.
Then Copernicus came along and challenged that view.
Copernicus messed everything up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then
Later, Darwin's theory of evolution
Darwin.
showed us that we're biologically connected to all life forms.
Yeah.
Now, consciousness seems to be the last frontier where we're trying to draw a line between humans and everything else.
But what if that line is more blurred than we think?
That's a great question.
The article mentions René Descartes'
Yes.
beast machine theory, where he claimed that animals were just biological robots, incapable of feeling or experiencing anything.
Right.
But modern neuroscience is painting a very different picture, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Hmm.
There's growing evidence suggesting that many non-human animals,
Okay.
especially mammals and birds,
Right.
might possess some level of consciousness,
Okay.
even if it's different from our own.
So they're conscious, but like in a different way?
Possibly.
Hmm.
For instance, studies have shown that some animals can recognize themselves in a mirror,
Really?
which is considered a sign of self-awareness.
That's incredible.
It is.
So the idea that humans are the only conscious beings on this planet
Right.
is starting to crumble under the weight of scientific evidence.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating.
But if we're going to talk about consciousness existing in other species,
Yeah?
we need to define what it actually is.
Right.
The article mentions a few different philosophical perspectives on consciousness, like
Yeah.
dualism, materialism, and monism.
Yes, but it's important to note that none of these are fully formed scientific theories yet.
Okay.
They're more like philosophical frameworks,
Right, so they're like,
different lenses through which we can view and try to understand the nature of consciousness.
okay, so it's like we're trying to solve a puzzle
Yeah.
without knowing what the picture's supposed to look like.
Exactly.
We have the pieces, but we're not sure how they fit together yet.
That's a great analogy.
And this raises another question. What role does philosophy play
Yeah,
in studying something as elusive as consciousness
right.
compared to hard science, which relies on empirical evidence and experimentation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Right?
Because it seems like philosophy might be more suited to exploring the what and the why of consciousness,
Right.
while science focuses on the how, the underlying mechanisms in the brain.
Right. So philosophy is like the bigger picture and
Right.
science is like the nitty-gritty details.
Exactly.
And it's interesting to compare the study of consciousness to the history of physics.
Yeah.
Initially, philosophers were heavily involved in shaping the scientific questions in physics,
Mhm.
but as empirical evidence accumulated,
Yeah.
science took the lead,
Mhm.
with philosophy taking a more supportive role. So will the study of consciousness follow a similar path?
It's possible.
Will science eventually be able to fully explain consciousness, rendering philosophy obsolete in this field?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson poses this very question at the podcast.
It does.
Will we reach a point
Right.
where we can fully understand consciousness
Okay.
through scientific methods alone?
Yeah.
Or will philosophy always have a role to play in unraveling this deepest of mysteries?
It seems like we're a long way from having all the answers.
It seems that way.
But exploring these questions,
Okay.
even without definitive solutions,
Yes.
is what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, and with each layer, we just discover new complexities and even more intriguing questions.
Speaking of complexities, the article touches on some different philosophical frameworks for understanding consciousness. Could you elaborate a bit more on those? I think our listener might benefit from a quick overview.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So these frameworks are essentially attempts to grapple with the fundamental relationship
Yeah.
between the mind and the physical world.
Okay.
One of the most enduring frameworks is dualism,
Okay, dualism.
which posits that the mind and body are separate entities.
Okay.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
The mind is non-physical, like a soul or a spirit,
Right.
while the body is the physical stuff, we're made of.
Okay, so dualism kind of separates our conscious experience from the physical workings of our brain.
Exactly. It suggests that our thoughts, feelings, and subjective experiences exist in a realm beyond the physical. However, dualism faces some challenges in explaining how a non-physical mind can interact with a physical body.
Okay, so then how does it work?
Well, that's where materialism comes in.
Materialism?
Materialism takes the opposite stance, asserting that everything is ultimately physical,
Okay.
including the mind.
So everything is physical.
Yeah, materialists believe that consciousness is just a product of brain activity, and that there's no separate non-physical mind.
So for materialists, it's all about the neurons firing in our brains.
Precisely. And materialism has gained a lot of traction, especially with the rise of neuroscience,
All right.
as we've learned more about the intricate workings of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
However, some argue that it still struggles to fully explain the subjective quality of our experiences,
Okay.
that feeling of what it's like to be conscious.
Right.
You know?
That's where Monism comes in, right?
Exactly. Mormonism tries to bridge the gap between dualism and materialism.
Okay.
It proposes that mind and matter are ultimately aspects of a single fundamental reality.
Oh,
Think of it like two sides of the same coin.
okay.
You know,
Yeah.
there are different flavors of monism,
Okay.
but the core idea is that consciousness isn't separate from the physical world.
Right.
It's woven into the very fabric of reality.
So monism suggests that consciousness might be like a more fundamental property of the universe than we currently understand.
Precisely. It's a fascinating concept that's gaining attention in some circles.
Yeah.
But it's important to emphasize that none of these frameworks have reached the status of a full-fledged scientific theory yet.
Okay.
They're more like philosophical tools that help us organize our thinking and guide further research.
Okay, so these philosophical frameworks provide a sort of map,
Yeah.
but we're still exploring the terrain of consciousness.
Right.
It's a journey with no clear destination in sight,
Exactly.
which is both exhilarating and a bit daunting.
It is.
But even without all the answers, this exploration raises important questions
Yeah.
about the ethical implications of consciousness, particularly in the realm of AI.
That's a crucial point, and Seth makes a compelling case for the continued importance of philosophy
Okay.
in guiding these ethical considerations of consciousness research,
Right.
especially as AI becomes more advanced.
Right.
He argues that we need to grapple with some really tough questions. Like, if we create an AI that exhibits all the signs of consciousness,
Right.
self-awareness, emotions,
Yeah.
even a sense of self,
Right.
would we grant it the same rights and considerations as a human being?
That's a mind-boggling question.
It is, isn't it?
It challenges us to rethink our definitions of personhood
Yeah.
and what it means to be deserving of moral consideration.
Exactly. And it's not just about AI.
Right.
The expanding understanding of animal consciousness also forces us to reevaluate our ethical responsibilities towards other species.
Mm.
If we acknowledge that animals, even those very different from us, might have conscious experiences,
Right.
how does that change our approach to animal welfare, research, and our interactions with the natural world?
It opens up a whole new dimension of ethical consideration.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if our anthropocentric biases
Yeah.
have blinded us to the potential consciousness of other beings, both biological and artificial.
That's a profound insight.
It is.
And it leads us back to the fundamental question of what truly distinguishes consciousness from mere functionality.
Okay.
The article uses a fascinating example to illustrate this distinction.
Ah.
The communication networks of trees.
Oh, yes, I remember that. It's the idea that trees can communicate with each other through their roots, sharing information about resources, threats, and even supporting each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Trees have evolved these complex interconnected systems that allow them to respond to their environment and even cooperate in sophisticated ways.
Yeah.
But does this mean that trees are conscious?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
It's tricky because on the surface, their behavior might seem to suggest some level of awareness. But do trees experience the wind subjectively? Do they feel anything?
This example highlights the crucial difference between functional awareness and genuine subjective experience. Trees might have a sophisticated system for responding to their surroundings. But do they have an inner world of experience like we do? Do they have feelings, thoughts, or a sense of self?
Right. It's the difference between simply reacting to stimuli
Yes.
and actually experiencing the world through the lens of consciousness.
And this distinction becomes even more critical when we consider the potential for artificial consciousness. Even if we could create an AI that flawlessly mimics human behavior,
Right.
could it be doing so without any true subjective experience?
That's the classic zombie scenario in philosophy.
Yeah.
An entity that behaves exactly like a conscious being, but lacks any inner experience.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we could ever definitively prove that an AI is experiencing consciousness or just simulating it based on its programming.
Precisely. And this brings us back to the core of human consciousness, that feeling of knowing, that subjective awareness that we experience. If an AI doesn't have that inner world of experience, if it doesn't feel anything, can we truly say it's conscious?
That's a question that will likely fuel debates.
Yes.
For years to come, especially as AI technology continues to advance.
Indeed. And as we continue to probe the depths of this mystery, I think one of the most important takeaways is that consciousness is still very much an enigma.
Yeah, it really is a mystery.
We've made some progress in understanding its biological underpinnings.
Right.
But the essence of subjective experience remains elusive.
It's almost like the more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind of fascinating ideas.
Yes.
But it feels like we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this vast and complex topic.
You're absolutely right. The study of consciousness is a journey with no clear end in sight.
Right.
And that's part of what makes it so captivating. It pushes us to the very limits of our understanding, forcing us to confront these fundamental mysteries of existence.
And it also highlights the interconnectedness of different fields of study. Neuroscience, philosophy, computer science, even ethics.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that tackling the big questions requires a multifaceted approach.
It's a testament to the power of interdisciplinary thinking.
So as we delve deeper into these uncharted waters, what's one key insight that you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Okay.
What's the big takeaway from all of this?
I think the most important takeaway is this. The fact that we haven't solved the mystery of consciousness yet doesn't diminish its significance. It's a reminder that we are surrounded by profound mysteries, even within our own minds.
Right.
And the pursuit of understanding these mysteries is one of the most fascinating and rewarding endeavors we can undertake.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thank you.
It's a reminder to stay curious, to keep questioning,
Yeah.
and to embrace the unknown. It's like we've been handed this treasure map, but the treasure itself is still hidden,
Yeah.
waiting to be discovered.
And who knows what we'll find along the way.
Right.
The journey of exploring consciousness, it's full of these unexpected twists and turns.
Speaking of unexpected twists, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We started by exploring this idea of consciousness as like a biological property
Right.
that arose through evolution. We then delved into this intriguing concept of the stable self.
Yes.
And we questioned whether it's a fundamental reality
Right.
or a clever illusion created by our brains.
That's the big question.
And we can't forget those illusionist philosophers
Oh, the illusionists.
who argue that consciousness itself
Yeah.
might be an elaborate trick.
A trick of the mind.
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about your own mind.
It really does.
We also tackled the goalpost problem.
Yes.
And how our definition of consciousness seems to shift as AI technology advances.
It's like we keep raising the bar to preserve our sense of human exceptionalism.
It's like we're constantly trying to outrun the machines in this race to define what it means to be truly conscious. But as we explored, that line between human and artificial intelligence might be blurrier than we think.
It's a very blurry line.
And it's not just AI that's challenging our assumptions.
Right.
The growing evidence for consciousness in other animals, particularly mammals and birds, is forcing us to reconsider our place in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
It's a humbling realization, you know?
It is.
It seems like every new discovery chips away at our anthropocentric biases, revealing a more complex and interconnected world
Absolutely.
than we ever imagined.
And this expanding view of consciousness has these really profound ethical implications,
Okay.
particularly when it comes to our treatment of animals,
Right.
the potential development of conscious AI.
Right.
These aren't just abstract philosophical questions.
No.
These are real-world issues we'll need to grapple with in the coming years.
It makes you wonder what the future holds, you know?
It does.
Will we reach a point where we can definitively prove the existence of artificial consciousness? And if so, how will that change our relationship with these intelligent machines?
Those are questions that will undoubtedly shape the future of humanity.
Right.
And they highlight the importance of this ongoing dialogue and collaboration between scientists, philosophers, ethicists, and policymakers.
All those different disciplines coming together.
The more we understand about consciousness,
Right.
the better equipped we'll be to navigate these complex challenges.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the enigmatic world of consciousness,
Yeah?
what's the one burning question
Okay.
that you think our listeners should ponder?
Okay, let me think.
What's that final thought that will linger in their mind long after this episode is over?
I think the question is this. If we could definitively prove that an AI was experiencing the world subjectively, feeling joy, sorrow, curiosity, all the richness of conscious experience,
Wow.
Would we grant it the same rights and considerations as a human being?
Wow, that's a powerful question.
It is.
It cuts to the core of what it means to be conscious.
Right.
To be deserving of moral consideration.
Exactly.
And to recognize the inherent value of sentient beings, regardless of their origin.
It's a big one.
It is, for our listener. Keep that question close as you continue your own exploration of the mysteries of consciousness. The answers we find may very well determine the future of humanity and our place in a universe that might be teeming with conscious life.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep diving deep.